we have to do our own expansion. And then this is the dorsal surface of the lung. So sheep obviously are horizontal. So it's going to be in that direction. And then if we go even deeper, a sheep pluck includes the liver. And here's the gallbladder. Okay. Bile is yellowish, but in this it usually stains a greenish yellow. And we'll be looking at these different structures. So let's see essentially the posterior view of the liver there. This would be in your part of the diaphragm here. And then also, if we look in the anterior aspect, there were some cuts there, so I'm going to come from the back here. There is you, here we go, the heart. So this is the parietal pericardium of the heart. It's been cut open. So this would be the parietal, the fibrous parietal pericardium where all this adipose tissue is. And if we turn it inside out, that would be the parietal serous pericardium, the simple squamous epithelia. I apologize for all these hemostats to block off. And then of course that's continuous onto the surface of the heart itself with the epicardium or the visceral serous pericardium. So once I take this down, if you're interested, you can still see the superior vena cava and so on that was missing. Most of the atria were missing, okay? So, let's see. Can you tear off a bunch of paper towels there for me? And that way I can pump the ambu bag and then someone else can pump it without fearing getting the bloody fluid on there. Thank you, yeah. Just another, I'll just put it on the side here. So, the ambu bag is my way of keeping my distance from whatever's going to come up and down through there through the elastic recoil, okay? So, air is moving in, and then that's the compliance, how easily it expands, and then the recoil, the elastic fibers in the recoil of that return the lung to its collapsed position, okay? So if it was actually in pleura, it would not be that collapsed because we've got atmospheric pressure increasing this collapse. Now, if I keep doing this really, really hard, you can see there's a few blebs here on the surface where alveoli have broken because the sheep's not going to usually pull and have atmospheric pressure push air in this hard. And so some of those alveoli are tearing and air is collecting under the visceral pleura, okay? So if anybody else wants to try pumping that and feeling the resistance, they'll probably have a better memory of what compliance is, because that difficulty is the compliance. And then anyone else can come along and just pinch that and get an idea of what it feels like. Sometimes you can feel the crackly. There are some extra gloves here, if anybody wants to do that. Any takers? No? Nobody? Go ahead. You don't want to do it? Okay. So, I usually have people that want to get in there and dissect and cut it apart. So, that is the force of the air, is the difference between the pressure that I'm creating with the ambu bag and the collapsed alveoli, all right? So now what I'm going to do is take the scissors, and we already have some cuts here, so I'll just take off the hemostats, and that will provide some access. I'll pump it and you can see what I've closed off. Hear that sound? There are openings there, but I'll make a larger opening. All right, so now when I do that, you hear that air coming out. So I've cut through the visceral pleura.
What's the inside?
So in bringing this bag up here, even though it's including the liver, and on that diagram there, they just have part of the lobe of the lung. They have one lobe. So I'm going to, so now the space between this bag and the visceral pleura of the lung is our pleural cavity, okay? So that now is somebody whose ribs have torn the visceral pleura, the parietal pleura and the visceral pleura, but the skin is still intact. And so as I push air in, some of it, most of it will go to the alveoli, but some will escape into the pleural cavity, okay? Now, this is expanding a lot more than your chest wall would be able to expand. So it's not going to explode. So you can see now that the compliance is going to decrease because that expanding lung has to push against this bag. And if it was in your body, that would just be the bag, it would have the solid ribs, and that would not increase as much. So that's what causes the collapsed lung with air movement, with the pneumothorax or even a hemothorax. Alrighty? Alright, so since nobody wants to, apparently.
Well, can we see inside of the lung?
Sure, yeah. So what I also will do is cut open the trachea. So where I made that cut, right here. To me it looks like Jell-O that's been beat with cream. And you can feel a little bit of roughness where the smaller bronchi are. So rather than taking the time to take it down right now, I'm just going to cut across here and then open up the trachea so you can see where the bronchi I've extended. But there's a softness right here where it's collapsible. That's the muscle. That's where the trachealis is. So these ridges that you see are the tracheal cartilages, those C-shaped tracheal cartilages, and that soft space there that I can bend in is the posterior region where the trachealis muscle would be. So that's easy to cut through, and you can see the edges of the cartilage there. And there are a few bronchi that come up high just to go straight to, right there. So that's just coming straight off the trachea to go into the superior lobe of the lung, instead of waiting to get all the way down to get to the primary bronchi. So now I'm cutting into a primary bronchus, and see that ridge right here? That's the carina. That's where we separate from the right bronchus and the left bronchus. And that's the bloody mucus that came up into my mouth a few years ago because I was blowing into the tube. All right, so someone who's getting a bronchoscope, they're going to pass the camera down to each of those. Those are the areas that would have, the next branch after that would have the pieces or plates of bronchi instead of the C-shaped rings. But the ridge between the primary and secondary is our carina. It's like the keel of a boat turned upside down. Alrighty, so what I cut through was the trachealis muscle that allows expansion of the esophagus. Yeah.
No cartilage.
Alrighty? Yeah, no cartilage there. Okay, let's see if I can find you guys a superior vena cava. Here we go. So here's the superior vena cava that you guys didn't get to see. It's quite wide, but very thin-walled. Okay, and here's the pulmonary trunk. So back to my trusty scissors. So here's what we didn't get to see when we were dissecting. So here's the superior vena cava. All right, most of our atria was gone when we did our sheep part dissection. So I'm going to put my finger inside the superior vena cava, and that would be the inferior vena cava. So the position of the heart in situ would be like this. Okay? And right there would be the coronary sinus. So if we open that up, I'll show you the coronary sinus, and then I'll call it an evening on dissection. This is called blood force dissection, by the way. And so there's the opening for the coronary sinus. All right, and that's what we see out here. So it's a vein, so it's very small pressure. And then we saw pulmonary trunk. This actually has some branches off of the aorta. We're cut up high enough. Okay? So this slippery surface that you see here, the shiny surface, I'm touching simple squamous epithelia. That's the visceral pleura.
That's the part that.
That's the visceral pleura. So if this was the parietal pleura, it would be lined with simple squamous epithelium. continuous at the hilum, but that's why it's shiny, because it's wet with that serous fluid. Okay?
On the lungs you passed around
Uh-huh.
earlier, the visceral, that was the stuff
That was what was,
coming off.
that was what was separating, was that thin, simple squamous flora, yeah, separating from the actual lung tissue. Yeah,